So the power and potential of research. I would never have thought that I'd find research and evidencing and data exciting. Like it would be the last thing that I would have ever imagined. And when I think back to my days of when I started working in prison in HMP only, it was suggested that I make that a research project. And it wasn't a perfect research project because I was doing the research and I was also doing the facilitating. So, like, don't tell anyone though. And I saw how difficult it was. So I'm really pleased that I did that because I saw the difficulty of it. Men in prison don't even want to come to group, let alone answer a load of questionnaires. So there's been times when me and Susan Marmot in particular, I can remember standing in really dusty, nasty, grimy workshops, trying to gather men around us with sweeties so that we could get them to fill out these questionnaires, and Gary was part of that too. So yeah, it was difficult. And I always think of rain and wind and going around with wet paperwork and things like that. So it was a labor of love. I loved the work that we were doing and the impact that we were having and the changes to lives that I was seeing. But we had to find some way of showing people who had the purse strings and people who had the who could say that no, we can't be in that prison anymore. We had to find a way of showing them a tangible way outside of the impact, because one of the things I've learned is that prison governors really don't care if there's change. They've spent so much time thinking about all the problems. They ignore the good stuff, basically, is how I see it. They spend all their times trying to fight fires and plug holes and things like that. So they literally, if there's something good happening, it's like, yeah, get on with that. I don't want to take any notice of it. So we had to find a way of being able to stay in the system. And back in the day, there was very little research around the Three Principles understanding. So actually, I felt like I was doing this labor of love for everyone and not just for Beyond Recovery. And I'm really glad that I did. I'm really glad that I did, because that was part of the start of a bigger picture of other people getting involved in research, of other people, in my sphere being able to grab a hold of those papers, as flawed as they were, and talk to their commissioners, even to places like Norway. I've had consultations with people in Norway and given them the papers that we've co-written. They've been able to get into the prison system there. So I've really seen over my 8 years in this world that evidencing what we do is important for many, many, many reasons. And one of them being able to demonstrate to other people, this is good because here's the data on that, as opposed to my famous saying when they asked me, well, how did they change? And I used to say, well, I don't know. I have a conversation and they change. That's all right when, you've got a friendly person who says, yeah, you can come and run a free group for me. But if you want to change a prison system, it doesn't really cut the mustard, or a school system or any other system, really. We have to sort of play the game, right? That really started, you might think it started a whole hatred towards research and the difficulty of it, but actually it got me really intrigued about how we could do this better. And one of the plus points for me was constantly iterating our programs. So constantly seeing, actually that didn't really work out well, what went on there, and having something to be able to, a starting point, even down to looking at, is it the combination of facilitators? Does that make a difference on a particular program? Is it when we introduce some paperwork or when we do some different activities? So constantly being able to step back from the fog of joy that happens to us all when we impact someone, and look past that to what's the bigger impact here, what works better. And so became very dedicated to looking at not just what I feel works, but what works above and beyond, you know, like from a much more academic viewpoint or a much more measured viewpoint, and not being attached to when something doesn't work, you know, being able to say, oh, hey, I mean, the only example that comes right into my mind is that it's way better, for instance, if you don't have the facilitator doing the research, because you get this bias, like the men by the end of at the beginning of the program, nobody wants to fill in a form. At the end of the program, they all want to fill in the form because they all want you to be there, because, you know, they've had change and they love you and all of these things. So that introduces this bias, and commissioners and people like that can sniff that out. So, you know, it's like, it's been a passion of mine to constantly get better at what we do and constantly be able to scale. We can't scale without having evidence. We can't relieve the world's suffering without showing that there's a basis on which all of this stuff lies.